Rumeysa Ozturk was recently released from federal detention. The story of her detention starts over a year ago when she co-authored this op-ed for her school newspaper. Rumeysa is a PhD student here on an F1 visa, and the op-ed basically says that Tufts should recognize the Palestinian genocide and divest from Israel. The op-ed doesn't call for terrorism or support it or advocate violence. The government hasn't ever alleged that writing this was a crime at all. But still, a year after the op-ed was published, the US Department of State approved revocation of Ozturk's F1 visa, apparently based solely on the assessment by DHS and ICE that Ozturk's co-authorship of the op-ed a year earlier demonstrated her involvement in organizations that may undermine US foreign policy. Ozturk was not informed that DHS and ICE were considering seeking her visa revocation, nor that such a determination was made. This revocation will be silent. The Department of State will not notify the subject of the revocation. Now, why? Why wouldn't you tell her, at least? The official reason is ongoing ICE operational security, but that's hard to understand. If you told Rumeysa her visa was being revoked, that would put ICE under threat somehow? I don't know about that. Rumeysa Ozturk has a different, and I think much better explanation. Quote, in her amended habeas petition, Ozturk alleges that her arrest and detention were unlawfully designed to punish her speech and chill the speech of others. In other words, the government didn't tell her her visa was revoked because they didn't want her to just go back to Turkey. They wanted to actually punish her. Federal agents arrested Rumeysa on the street, and they held her in a federal detention center in Louisiana for weeks. They wanted to punish her. They wanted to hurt her for what she said. She said something they didn't like in her school newspaper, so they wanted to punish her for it. Not only to punish her, but also to chill free speech, to make other people know that the government will punish you for speech, and so other people will become afraid to speak against the Trump administration. That's the logic here behind chilling speech. And I'm quoting here from an appeals court ruling that returned Rumeysa to Vermont and ultimately ordered her released in a subsequent ruling. Anyway, quote, she, meaning Rumeysa, she asserts that the government arrested and detained her to prevent speech with which it disagrees. Such an act would be a violation of the Constitution. Rumeysa is not a citizen. She's here on a student visa. She is a student, and she's doing the kind of things we should expect students to do. She's writing for her school newspaper. Rumeysa is protected by the First Amendment, by the Constitution. She has a right to free speech. She has a right to express opinions, even if the federal government or the Secretary of State disagrees with those opinions. Elsewhere, I've heard Secretary of State Marco Rubio describe Rumeysa and people like her as guests in our country. And I think that description is apt. They're here on a student visa. They are our guests. So imagine inviting a guest over to your home, hearing from the guest an opinion you don't like, and deciding to imprison that guest in your home for weeks. That's what happened here. That's what happened to Rumeysa. Rumeysa is now released from ICE custody on her own recognizance without any form of monitoring or tracking, and she's not subject to any travel restrictions. So you might think the system works, and it kind of does. The courts reached the right conclusion here. But now that we've reached this conclusion, and the federal government has had an opportunity to present any other evidence besides the op-ed against Rumeysa, and they didn't, that tells us that the federal government didn't have any evidence against her, except for the fact that she wrote that constitutionally protected op-ed. And despite not having any evidence against her, they still imprisoned her for weeks. From the perspective of people in the Trump administration who are responsible for this, things may be going fine. They still got what they wanted. They never had a legal claim against Rumeysa. She didn't do anything wrong. She didn't commit any crimes. And yet they still held her incarcerated for weeks. And they still got this message out to the public that even if you're doing something that is completely, obviously protected by the First Amendment, like writing an op-ed for your school newspaper, we in the Trump administration are still willing and able to punish, to incarcerate and deport you if you say something we don't like, if you have an opinion we don't like. And so that still may accomplish the goal of chilling the speech of others. So I think that while it's good Rumeysa has been released and is now free, we haven't had a satisfactory resolution to this until the people responsible for violating the Constitution have been removed from their office and punished appropriately. Thanks for your time.